The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when Veyra stepped forward. Her silver skin reflected the cold light of 1,000 watching species, each one calculating the cost of her words. She raised one slender hand and spoke clearly. "My people offer partnership to any who will accept. No contracts, no demands, no rules. Only cooperation built on trust." The chamber erupted in suspicious murmurs. Representatives from the Syrathi Empire leaned back in their seats. The Silicate Confederation transmitted denial codes before she finished speaking. 37 species rejected the offer within minutes. They had seen traps before. No one gave something for nothing in a galaxy built on leverage and power. But Captain Derek Stone, representing humanity's small delegation, stood up. "I accept." Vara's violet eyes widened. In 300 years of offering this partnership across the stars, no one had ever said yes. Derek walked through the shocked silence to meet her at the center platform. The other species watched like predators studying prey. "You don't even know what you're accepting," Veyra said quietly. Derek shrugged. "You offered trust. Either you mean it or you don't. I'm betting you mean it." "For the first time in centuries," Veyra smiled. "Then come with me, human. Let me show you why your species just saved the galaxy." The journey to Vara's homeworld took 4 days through quantum lanes that bent space into ribbons of light. Derek spent the time learning her language, her customs, the way her people communicated in harmonics that felt like music against his thoughts. When they arrived, the planet gleamed beneath them like a pearl wrapped in atmosphere. Cities spiraled upward in organic patterns that seemed grown rather than built. Veyra led him through streets where her people moved in synchronized grace, their consciousness linked in ways Derek couldn't yet comprehend. She brought him to a meditation chamber carved from living crystal. "My people share memories through touch," she explained. "It's how we truly know one another, but it requires absolute vulnerability. What I share, you will experience as if it were your own." Derek extended his hand without hesitation. "Show me." Vara's fingers touched his palm, and Derek's world exploded into sensation. He felt the crushing weight of her species near extinction, saw their son dying while they scrambled to build generation ships with failing technology. He experienced her grandmother's sacrifice, staying behind with millions of others so the ships could launch with enough resources for the young. He felt 300 years of Vara's lonely mission offering partnership to species after species, watching them turn away in fear and suspicion. The grief was overwhelming. When the connection broke, Derek had tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry your people suffered that way." Veyra stared at him, stunned. Every species that had reluctantly attempted the sharing had immediately searched for tactical advantages, for weaknesses to exploit. But Derek only offered compassion. She asked the question that would change everything. "Will you share your memory in return?" Derek closed his eyes and reached for her hand again. This time he opened the door to his worst moment. Veyra gasped as she experienced his memories of the Mars colony massacre. She felt his helplessness as he watched friends die from a sabotaged life support system. She experienced his rage and guilt for surviving when 200 others didn't. When they separated, Veyra was shaking. "You showed me your trauma willingly. You could have hidden it, shown me something safer." Derek's voice was rough. "You trusted me with your pain. Seemed only fair to trust you with mine." Veyra sat down heavily, something crystallizing in her mind. Humans were either the most foolish species she'd ever encountered, or the bravest. She suspected the latter. "I need to tell you why I really made that offer," she said, "and why your acceptance might be the only thing that saves us all." The briefing room hummed with holographic projections of star systems, trade routes, and governmental structures. Veyra gestured, and the images shifted to show infection patterns spreading like dark veins through the galaxy. "They're called the Vrau," she said. "A parasitic hive mind that infiltrates leadership and quietly converts populations. They don't invade with ships. They arrive as diplomats, refugees, traders. By the time a species realizes what's happening, the Vrau control their military and government. Resistance becomes impossible." Derek studied the patterns with growing horror. "How many species have they taken?" Vara's expression darkened. 17 that we've confirmed. Probably more. The Vral are patient. They spend decades integrating before revealing themselves. She pulled up another display showing neural scans. My people's consciousness sharing is the only reliable detection method. When we connect with someone, we know immediately if they're hosting a Vral parasite. The invader can't hide in shared memory, but it requires the kind of complete vulnerability you just demonstrated. That's why I offered partnership with no demands. Derek felt the pieces falling into place. The other species couldn't risk it. Opening their minds to you meant exposing state secrets, military capabilities, every weakness. Vara nodded grimly. They feared us more than an invisible enemy. Some suspected we were the threat, that consciousness sharing was itself a form of invasion, so they rejected the only tool that could save them. She activated another display showing recent council members. 3 faces glowed with red markers. These are Vral agents currently serving on the Galactic Council. I've identified them through brief, accidental contact, but without proof others will accept. Without partnership that lets me screen entire governments, I can't stop them. Derek leaned forward, studying the marked faces. One was the Carthon representative, who'd rejected Vara's offer most vehemently. What happens if they're not stopped? Vara met his eyes. Eventually the Vral control enough votes to reshape galactic law. They'll ban consciousness sharing as invasive, criminalize my people's abilities. Then they'll have free reign to spread, without opposition. In 2 generations, every species in council space will be Vral. Derek's jaw tightened. Not if humanity has anything to say about it. The return to Earth took 3 days of frantic preparation. Derek drafted reports, compiled evidence, rehearsed explanations for how he'd explain the impossible. Vara came with him, willing to demonstrate her people's abilities to human leadership despite the risk. They arrived to find Admiral Hayes and General Carter waiting in a secure bunker beneath Geneva. The briefing lasted 4 hours. Derek showed them everything, explained the Vral threat, demonstrated consciousness sharing with Vara while monitored by neural specialists. The evidence was undeniable. When he finished, Hayes leaned back with a calculating expression that made Derek's stomach drop. So these Vral infiltrators are in multiple governments right now, including species with significant military power? Derek nodded cautiously. Yes, sir. That's why we need to. Carter cut him off. And Vara's people can detect them instantly through this sharing process? Something in the general's tone raised warning flags. Yes, but only if there's mutual trust and... Hayes stood abruptly. Captain Stone, you've just handed us the most powerful intelligence tool in galactic history. We're authorizing Project Communion immediately. Vara's people will be brought to Earth under protective custody. We'll begin systematic screening of all allied governments. Derek felt ice spread through his chest. Sir, with respect, that's not what I'm proposing. Vara's offer was partnership, not conscription. Her people need to consent to... Carter's voice hardened. Captain, we're facing an existential threat to human sovereignty. We don't have time for diplomatic niceties. Vara's species has a biological advantage that can save billions of lives. We'll compensate them fairly, ensure their safety, but this is too important to leave to voluntary cooperation. Derek looked at Veyra, saw the resignation in her eyes. She'd seen this response before, just in different forms. Every species eventually tried to weaponize what they couldn't understand. General Carter, if we force this, we become exactly what the other species feared. We prove that trust was a mistake. Hayes' expression turned cold. Your objection is noted, Captain. But you're dismissed from this operation effective immediately. We'll take it from here. Security personnel moved toward Vara, neural inhibitors ready. Derek stepped between them and Vara, hand moving to his sidearm. Sir, I can't let you do this. The standoff lasted exactly 4 seconds before Derek made his choice. He grabbed Vara's hand and activated the emergency transport beacon on his wrist. The bunker exploded with shouts and weapons fire, but the quantum displacement was already engaged. They materialized on Vara's ship in orbit, alarms screaming as human defense systems locked, targeting solutions. Derek killed the ship's transponder and engaged stealth protocols. I just committed treason, he said, breathing hard. Vara was already plotting escape vectors. You honored the partnership. That's worth more than you know. They jumped to quantum space before the missiles launched, leaving Earth behind. Derek stared at the viewport as stars stretched into lines of light. I need to warn you. They'll come for your people now. They'll try to force the partnership you offered freely. Vara's hands moved across controls with practiced efficiency. I know. My species will debate abandoning humanity entirely. Some will say you've proven you're no different than the others. Derek felt the weight of failure crushing down. Maybe they're right. Maybe I was naive to think. Veyra grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to meet her eyes. You defied your own leaders to protect my people's autonomy. You sacrificed everything to honor trust. That's not naivety, Derek. That's courage. She pulled up a star chart showing the Galactic Council's location. But courage alone won't stop the Vral or save your species from itself. We need a third option. Derek studied the chart, mind racing through possibilities. What if we expose the Vral publicly? Force the Council to acknowledge the threat without requiring your people to submit to any government's control. Vara shook her head. We have no proof they'll accept. My word against theirs, and I'm the one they already distrust. Derek's eyes lit up with desperate inspiration. But you can detect them through consciousness sharing, right? Even brief contact? Vara nodded slowly. Yes, but contact requires physical proximity and... She stopped, understanding blooming across her face. The Galactic Council meets in person once per cycle. Every representative in the same chamber. Derek pulled up the council schedule. Next session is in 6 days. If we can get you inside, you touch each representative during normal greeting protocols. When you identify the Vrail agents, we expose them immediately, in front of everyone. Vara ran calculations on her display. It would work, but they'll have security screening protocols. And if we're caught before identification is complete, the Vrail will know we're onto them. They'll disappear into the population and we'll never get another chance. Derek met her eyes. Then we'd better not get caught. The planning consumed the next 5 days. Veyra contacted her people, explained the situation, and requested volunteers. To Derek's surprise, 40 consciousness sharers volunteered immediately. They'd been waiting centuries for a species brave enough to fight alongside them. Derek reached out to allies he'd made during his military service, calling in every favor. Lisa Morgan, a smuggler who owed him her life, provided transport. Commander James Sullivan, who'd served with Derek on Mars, leaked security protocols for the council chamber. Maya Chen, a xenolinguist, created false credentials that would pass initial screening. The pieces fell into place like a blade finding its sheath. On the morning of the council session, Derek and Vara entered the chamber among a crowd of observers and minor delegates. Vara's people were scattered throughout the room, disguised as assistants and translators. The session began with standard protocols. Representatives greeted each other with traditional gestures. Vara moved through the crowd with practiced ease, touching hands, brushing shoulders, offering respectful bows that brought her into brief contact with each council member. Derek watched from across the room, counting. 30 representatives contacted. 35. Vara's expression remained neutral, but her hand signals told him what he needed to know. 3 confirmed Vral hosts so far, including the Carthon representative. 40 representatives. 45. A 4th Vral identified among the Silicate delegation. Security was starting to notice Vara's movement patterns. Derek created a distraction, loudly questioning a procedural point about human representation. Guards moved toward him just as Vara completed her circuit. 50 representatives, 5 Vral confirmed. She caught Derek's eye and nodded. Now or never. Derek triggered the signal. Every consciousness sharer in the room moved simultaneously, forming a circle around the 5 identified representatives. Vara stepped to the center platform and spoke in a voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. Members of the Galactic Council, I have proof of Vral infiltration among your ranks. These 5 individuals are hosting parasitic entities that have compromised your governments. The chamber erupted in chaos. The accused representatives tried to flee but found themselves surrounded. Security didn't know who to restrain. Then Vara did something unprecedented. She offered public consciousness sharing, projecting her memories onto the chamber's holographic displays for all to see. The assembled species watched in stunned silence as Veyra revealed everything. The 300-year mission. The countless rejections. The desperate need for trust-based partnership. And most damning, the neural scans showing the Vraal's distinctive patterns in the 5 accused representatives. The evidence was irrefutable, displayed in a format that couldn't be faked or manipulated. One of the accused, the Carthon representative, suddenly convulsed. His form rippled and something else looked out through his eyes, ancient and cold. Clever human, the Vraal spoke through its host. But you've only found 5 of us. We've been here for decades. You'll never locate them all. Derek stepped forward, Veyra beside him. Maybe not. But now the galaxy knows you exist. Now they know consciousness sharing can detect you. And now they understand why Veyra's partnership offer wasn't a threat. It was salvation. He turned to address the council. My species accepted Veyra's offer because we understood something you didn't. Real strength isn't protecting yourself from allies. It's having the courage to be vulnerable with them. The Vraal counted on your fear and suspicion. They knew you'd reject the one defense that could stop them. The Silicate Confederation's alternate representative, uninfected and shocked by their leader's exposure, spoke into the silence. The human is correct. We rejected partnership because we feared exploitation. Instead, we enabled our own infiltration. One by one, other species began stepping forward. The Talgrin hierarchy, the Meridian Collective, even the proud Carthon Empire's military commander, horrified by their representatives' compromise. Each formally accepted Veyra's partnership offer, understanding finally what it truly meant. Within hours, consciousness sharers were screening governments across council space. The Vraal network, hidden for generations, unraveled in days. Hundreds of infiltrators were identified and safely separated from their hosts. The parasites were contained in stasis fields, studied but not destroyed, awaiting a solution that might one day rehabilitate rather than eliminate them. Derek stood with Veyra on the observation deck of her ship, watching as the Galactic Council reconvened below. Earth had been granted full membership, their previous probationary status elevated in recognition of humanity's role. Admiral Hayes had issued a formal apology and recalled the Project Communion authorization. General Carter had resigned. Veyra touched Derek's shoulder gently. Your people surprised me. After Hayes and Carter, I thought humanity might follow the pattern of every other species. Fear leading to control. Derek shook his head. They did what they thought necessary to protect Earth. Can't entirely fault them for that. But enough humans understood that survival isn't the same as living. We've spent our whole history learning that the hard way. Below them, the Council was voting on the Consciousness Sharing Protection Act, legislation that would criminalize forced mental connection and establish Veyra's people as independent partners rather than assets. The measure passed unanimously. Veyra smiled, something like hope brightening her features. In 300 years, I never imagined it would be humanity that changed everything. You're young, reckless, and you make terrible decisions half the time. Derek laughed. That's a pretty accurate assessment. Veyra's expression turned serious. But you also trust with your whole hearts. You leap before looking because you believe in possibilities others can't see. That's not weakness, Derek. That's the rarest strength in the galaxy. The observation deck's display shifted, showing requests from 47 species seeking consciousness-sharing partnerships. Veyra's people would spend the next decade building networks of trust across the stars, creating bonds that would make future Vraal infiltration impossible. Humanity would serve as mediators and bridges. The species that proved vulnerability could be power. Derek watched the stars beyond the viewport, thinking about the long road ahead. The galaxy was vast and full of threats they hadn't yet discovered. But for the first time in centuries, species were facing those threats together, protected not by weapons or walls, but by the simple, revolutionary act of trusting one another. Veyra had offered partnership to anyone who would accept, with no demands and no rules. The galaxy had finally learned what humanity understood instinctively. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say yes,